and welcome to another edition of Resistance TV. In tonight's programme, we're going to be talking to Asa Winstanley about his new book called Weaponising Anti-Semitism. It's about how the Israel lobby brought down Jeremy Corbyn. Alexis Sale says it's vital reading, and John Pilgers described it as outstanding journalism. Roger Waters calls it explosive, and Ken Loach says every bookshop should sell it and everybody should read it. Asa is an investigative journalist and associate editor with the Electronic Intifada. He's also a co-host of the Electronic Intifada podcast and publishes a weekly Substack newsletter called Palestine is Still the Issue. Hi, Asa. How are you, mate? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. Thanks, Chris. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, mate. A bit warm, as we were saying before we started this evening, but, you know, we mustn't complain. We're like the warmer weather, I'm sure. Yeah. Listen, I mean, when I've said, just let's start, Ace. I mean, when I've said that the Israel lobby destroyed the, I mean, I've been saying that the Israel lobby has destroyed the Corbyn project for some time now, and I often get a bit of pushback from some people on the left who say, it wasn't the Israel lobby, it was the second referendum, commitment to a second referendum on Brexit. How would you respond to that, Asa?
Well, I think there's 2 points to make about that. First of all, I would say I don't think anyone on the left disputes the fact that it had a massive impact. I think it's more about whether it had the biggest impact. And I would say two things. I would say, first of all, it's almost academic. Like it's I would say, you know, as long as you recognize the fact that it had an impact, I think that's the important thing. I don't think anyone can really deny that. And second of all, I would say that it had enough of an impact that it's if Israel and its lobby had not been able to do it, had not been able to successfully smear Jeremy Corbyn as an anti-Semite, then I think he would have become prime minister. I do think that is the case. And I agree that the whole Brexit debate and the referendum, the issue of having a second referendum, I agree that it played a role, but I don't think it had the damage that the anti-Semitism smears did. And the reason for that is simply that I don't think it got to Jeremy Corbyn as personally as the anti-Semitism smears did. Like it didn't have the same amount of damage. It was something that, it caused division within the party. And it probably had an impact electorally. But the anti-Semitism smears had such a big impact on the movement. And I think that's the point to me, is the movement. The movement behind Corbyn was his superpower. You know, it was the only reason he was able to even become the leader of the Labour Party in the first place was because there was this massive popular movement in support of him, you know. And I don't think, as divisive as the Brexit referendum was, I just don't think it had the same poisonous impact that anti-Semitism smears did. And I don't think it had the same personal impact on Jeremy Corbyn either, because I opened my book with the Corbyn's interview way back in 2015 with Channel 4 News, because you can, where it's quite hostile, you know, despite the fact that it's supposedly this liberal news channel. It's quite hostile. Like Christian Guru Murthy is quite hostile to Corbyn on every issue, just even on the issue of refugees and asylum seekers. He's sort of attacking Corbyn in these kinds of using right-wing talking points, really. But then at the end of the interview, he drops in this stuff about, well, why did you call Hamas and Hezbollah your friends? And you did this and you did that. Yeah. And you could see in that interview how that impacted on Jeremy Corbyn. It was something he kind of got angry about it, actually, which was unusual to see. And I think from that moment, it would have been very clear to the Israel lobby, the pro-Israel groups, and even to the Israeli state, that this was a hot button issue and something that could be used to great effect.
No, indeed. I mean, my view on it, Asa, is that yes, of course, the Brexit referendum did have a big impact, but like you, I think that the the weaponization of anti-Semitism and the smears relating to that, driven by the Israeli state and its assets in this country, hold Jeremy below the waterline. It's actually sapped away, his political capital in that sense.
Yeah.
And my view is that, Jeremy, well, maybe it was his advisors, but in the end, Jeremy went along with this. Jeremy facilitated that by continually giving ground to them and apologizing to them, which I remember saying to Jeremy, and I've made this point on this program and indeed on other shows before. I said to Jeremy, for Christ's sake, Jeremy, stop apologizing. You've got, of all people, have got nothing to apologize for. You've done more than anybody to fight racism in the House. And when, the likes of David Cameron were wearing badges saying "Hang Mandela," you were getting arrested on the steps of the South African embassy in Trafalgar Square. I mean, what's your take on that, Ace? I mean, where do you think Jeremy went wrong? Or indeed, do you think he went wrong? I mean, what's your thought? Where did it all go wrong for Jeremy?
Yeah.
Was he responsible for the the disaster that ended up happening?
Yeah, I mean, he made mistakes. There's no doubt about that. Like it was a massive mistake to. I mean, the irony. I mean, I said this on another podcast recently. The irony is that Jeremy Corbyn is now in the exact same position that you were in.
Exactly.
And it's that is what, it gives me, no pleasure to say that we were right about that, but we were right about it. And we did say all along that, if you give ground to these people in this way, eventually it's going to come for you as well. And that's what happened. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn Jeremy Corbyn was sort of in office but not in power, and he wasn't even in office. I think he was partly in office, and especially by the end it seems like people like McDonnell were more in power, were more in the driving seat. I mean, it was a big mistake.
They were in the driving seat, but it was driving the bus over the cliff. I mean, the likes of John McDonnell, weren't they? I mean, Jeremy should have pulled the handbrake. I said, "John, you're taking us over the bloody cliff, mate. What you doing?" But obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was so vicious. I mean, when not long after I got re-elected, should I say, because I lost my seat, as you know, in 2015, and got re-elected in 2017. And I remember giving an interview. It was like a full-page interview to The Guardian. I think I'd whetted the media's appetite because I fought the most marginal seat in England, and I said that, I was the most Corbyn-friendly candidate standing anywhere in the country in England's most, marginal seat. This would be a test case for Corbynism, and so I think that sort of put me on the media's sort of radar. Anyway, they did this interview with me. I think you referred to it in the book, actually, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I read it somewhere else, where I was trying to address the absurd smears that were being directed at Jeremy, and I was saying, it's kind of there was. What did I say? Bullshit and I can't remember the precise terms I used, but basically I was saying it was a pile of nonsense anyway. And I cited different examples, the attacks about it being a Czech spy, about being a misogynist, and I was saying, the weapon and the accusation of anti-Semitism, were particularly egregious in that sense.
Yeah.
And that put me, even to an even greater extent on the radar of the Israel lobby, the Zionist lobby. I mean, they'd already started to criticize me prior to my re-election when I made some fairly tame comments, I think, about the Oxford University Labour Club, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But it was just the viciousness of it. I mean, you've got the likes of Ruth Smith, who you obviously talk about quite extensively in the book. I mean, she was calling for the whip to be withdrawn from me after 2 months I've been re-elected. because of this interview in The Guardian. I mean, yeah, but they were so vicious, so relentless. I mean, it's a long-winded question, Asa, but really the nub of what I'm trying to get at is, were you surprised by the viciousness, or is that something you expected from the Israel lobby?
I wasn't surprised, personally, no, but that's because I deal with them. We're subjected to them, I should say, on a daily basis. I think that we see, as somebody who reports professionally on the Israel lobby, I knew and I'd experienced firsthand, and I'd experienced from reporting on people on the left and people in the Palestine Solidarity movement who have been attacked by the pro-Israel lobby, and this kind of weaponized anti-Semitism, false allegations of anti-Semitism used as a political weapon is their primary weapon, and it has been for many decades. So yeah. What you said was proxy wars and bullshit.
Oh, that was it. Yeah, proxy wars and bullshit. I couldn't remember the precise.
You said proxy wars and bullshit, but you were talking about rows in the party in general. Including so-called anti-Semitism. But what you actually said, I mean, I agree. Like that interview with The Guardian was really, I think that was really when the Israel lobby marked your card, because you made that the comment. The interview wasn't mostly about that, but it was kind of a comment in passing at the end of the interview. But then after that, from then on, they were really going all out for you in the same way they went all out to get rid of Ken Livingstone and Jackie Walker. What you said was actually quite moderate, really, because you said I'm looking at the book now, the text of my book, and you said I'm not saying it never happens, but it is a really dirty, low-down trick, particularly the anti-Semitism smears. Many people in the Jewish community are appalled by what they see as the weaponization of anti-Semitism for political ends. So you were being quite moderate. Like, you weren't saying that, the left is immune. Like, you weren't saying that it could never possibly happen. Like, yes, of course, there's probably cases on the margins of the Labour Party, which was an organization of 600,000 people at that stage. Around 600,000 people. Yeah, there could be marginal cases of anti-Semitism. But the point that you were trying to make, and that a lot of people were trying to make, was that anti-Semitism is overwhelmingly and almost completely a phenomenon of the right and the far right. And what was being carried out against the Labour Party, against Jeremy Corbyn personally, and against the movement behind Jeremy Corbyn was a smear campaign. It was a deliberately calculated smear campaign. And, that's what a lot of the British left, I think, never really faced up to.
Well, some of them actually sort of accelerated it, didn't they? And actually joined in the attacks. We know the most infamous example probably is Owen Jones, but there were many others as well, weren't there?
Novara Media was really terrible by the end. They were quite friendly with you in the beginning, and then threw you under the bus, and in quite a disgusting way, really. And the reason I have written this book is because I want to start a debate, and I want to have a discussion about how the left can defeat these attacks, and about how we can face up to the reality of the defeat and the reality of how this strategy will be used again and again until it's defeated. And you have to face up to it, and you can't cut the Gordian knot, as John McDonnell claimed would help. But I mean, it doesn't make any sense. His whole point was about the IHRA document. Well, if they're making all this fuss about the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, so we'll just give them that and then they'll shut up. Well, when has that ever helped? It didn't help. They kept going on with this whole false weaponized anti-Semitism, and it led to Corbyn's defeat. I mean, I don't think anyone can deny that at a minimum it played a major role in his defeat.
No, indeed. I mean, John, if I could maybe give my book a plug as well while we're on 10 Years Hard Labour. I talk about John McDonnell when I was reinstated and there was moves afoot to have me resuspended again, which happened within 48 hours by an alleged kind of, Corbynista General Secretary, Jenny Formby. And there were 150 or so MPs and peers who'd signed a motion to go to the next Parliamentary Labour Party meeting, which never actually got that far because I was suspended before that meeting took place, calling for the whip to be withdrawn and for an inquiry to be mounted into how it was possible that somebody like me could have been reinstated by an NEC committee. But John's advice to me was to apologise again and again, to offer to see and speak to any MP who's been offended, hurt or distressed by what I said, and do the same for any National Executive Committee member who's been hurt, offended or distressed. He also urged me to go and see the Board of Deputies and to go and see the Jewish, basically prostrate myself before the Jewish Leadership Council, and to go and essentially apologise to the local synagogue, of which there isn't one in Derby. but I said that there's no way that's going to happen, John, because the evidence of the last, apart from it being the wrong thing to do anyway, just in principle, but I mean, practically it isn't working. The last 4 years surely demonstrates that. And my request to John was that what he needed to do was to issue a statement welcoming my return to the party and to go onto the media to defend me. But of course that never happened. I just wondered what your thoughts were really about.
What did he say when you said that?
He just went quiet and never got any response back, Yeah. No response, and then I never heard another word from him. And frankly, I never heard. I was only contacted. Well, you can count on the fingers of one hand the number of Socialist campaign group members who even spoke to me privately about what had happened to me, to express any kind of level of solidarity. Laura Smith was the most supportive, followed by Richard Bergen, but nobody was prepared to speak out, and indeed about me, or for that matter anybody else. And as you know, Asa, I was the only MP that was speaking out for others who'd been previously attacked. So I just wondered what your thoughts were about the the role of the Socialist campaign group in this whole sorry saga.
Well, it was completely useless, wasn't it? I mean, it was absent. It did nothing. If it was either completely silent or it just helped, like there was, it was pointless. It's a complete irrelevance. So do you think then I mean, you say in your book, you're kind of talking about, I mean, the reason for writing the book was to, well, obviously chronicle what had happened, but also give some hope that, the Israel lobby can be defeated. I mean, they are very powerful. I mean, do you think that it's possible for a progressive anti-imperialist socialists to potentially come to the fore again, as Jeremy did, but to actually prevail next time? Are they defeatable? I do. It just takes the political will, because you've just given an example there. There was two suggestions there in that discussion between you and John McDonnell. He suggested that you prostrate yourself before the Israel lobby, essentially, and the NEC. If you'd have done that, as you said, even aside from the fact that it's the wrong thing to do, let's just say, for the sake of argument, you'd have done that. Would it have stopped you from being expelled? No. Of course not. There's no way it would have. So his suggestion would have done nothing. But your suggestion to him of having a statement in favour of welcoming you back would have been a massive defeat to them. All of these defeats were kind of self-inflicted in a way, because it was, I mean, as you've alluded to, it was the left that had, to a large extent, had the reins of power in the Labour Party. It was Jenny Formby who suspended you, you know?
Yeah. And a supposed Corbynista. But
yeah. It was the whole thing was kind of self-inflicted. It was a real own goal. And so it wouldn't, I think that, yes, the Israel lobby is powerful. Yes, it has a lot of influence, but I think it can be defeated fairly easily, or it just takes some political will to stand up to them.
Do you think the Israel lobby then were consciously at the outset of the emergence of Momentum, because Momentum was initially a very positive force and made a huge contribution to the big surge in support for Jeremy and the Labour Party in the 2017 election, but then it all went wrong very, very quickly thereafter. I mean, do you put that down to the Zionist lobby that were in an infiltrator or in a high place, or were indeed instrumentally starting the organisation in the first place? What was it all about? I mean, in your view, I mean, Momentum, because I mean that allegedly it was about supporting Jeremy and facilitating a progressive anti-imperialist government to come to power, and then the leadership seemed to be very much working to prevent that in the end. I mean, what's your thoughts about that and the role of the Israel lobby on Momentum?
Yeah, I explain in the book. I do talk about this in the book. John Landsman was somebody who, in his own words, saw himself as a Zionist when he was young, and he was somebody who he went to a kibbutz. He spent time on a kibbutz in occupied Palestine, and he was never really on board with Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister. There was some qualified support for Jeremy Corbyn as Labour Party leader at certain periods, but only as a stopgap. And I explain that in the book, really, that it was people like John Landsman specifically, and the sort of people around him, saw Jeremy Corbyn as a stopgap leader of the Labour Party, as somebody who could make way for somebody more who, on their kind of tendency of the Labour Party, I suppose, soft left in a way, but without anti-imperialist foreign policy and without support for Palestinian liberation. And so I think Momentum was, in terms of the membership, it was kind of, the membership was, the membership was very pro-Corbyn, and the membership of Momentum was against the witch hunt, all along. There was a poll at the end, and I've written about this, and I mention it in the book. There was a polling after the 2019 general election showing that I think it was 74%, certainly a large majority of Labour Party members thought that they never bought into the anti-Semitism smears. Essentially, they thought 74% of them thought that it was either vastly exaggerated or invented, in the words of the poll. So that's huge. Like, it's a huge defeat for the Israel lobby in terms of the narrative and controlling the narrative. They were unable to control the narrative at the popular level, because that would be their ultimate goal, would be to change the narrative at the popular level. They weren't able to do that. They were able to change the narrative at the establishment level, at the level of the mainstream media, the level of the the controlling establishment of the Labour Party bureaucrats, Labour Party MPs, and so forth. So they were able to influence that. But the Momentum, the membership of the Labour Party, 74% of them never believed it. And those figures actually got higher and higher, as people were able to see. But it wasn't 74% at the beginning of the smears. By the end, it was huge. And the Momentum membership, that figure was even higher. It was something like 92%, I think. It's the figures and everything are in
That's
my book.
interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so, you know, John Landsman, who by the end played a very pernicious role, really, in promoting the anti-Semitism smears. He called for Ken Livingstone to not only get out of the party, but to leave politics altogether. Yeah. He was incredibly angry about you being, you know, he I remember his tweets, like John Landsman's tweets tend to be kind of diplomatic for the most part. But then when you were found to be innocent of anti-Semitism and readmitted into the Labour Party, he was, you know, he tweeted about it in just incredibly angry terms, which was unlike him. So, you know, it showed just the really negative role that he was playing.
Do you think then the role of Momentum then simply, or that negative role of Momentum, simply steered by John Landsman, who was instinctively a Zionist, or do you think there was a more nefarious role from the wider, you know, Zionist movement, the Israel lobby, in actually trying to influence Momentum thing?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I think that Momentum, the Momentum leadership. I mean, look, I remember at the beginning when Momentum first started, I went along to one of its events, and I remember just thinking, well, this is a completely new organization. Everyone's here, not for. And John Landsman was speaking, and he was speaking about how. So this would have been in 2016 when the coup was going on, and he was talking about the minority of Labour MPs who had supported the coup, and he was trying to rally the crowd and saying, you know, show your appreciation for Rebecca Long Bailey, for this one and that. I forget all the names he mentioned. I do remember he said Rebecca Long Bailey, but basically for the minority of MPs who had supported Corbyn in that no confidence vote, the people who had voted in favour of him. And you know, it was an interesting rally, and I just thought, well, everyone's here to stop Corbyn from being eliminated, from being politically eliminated. And we're all sort of giving money. We're all giving, you know, £5 to Momentum because we wanted to stop, you know, because they said they were going to do something to stop Jeremy Corbyn being politically assassinated, essentially. But I remember feeling a reservation even at the time then when I knew nothing really about John Landsman. Just thinking like, well, we don't know anything about this organization. You know, it's gathering all of our personal data. It's, you know, it's taking donations. We're giving it money, and it was just a case of, well, we're throwing this money at at this organization, just almost in desperation to kind of stop this political coup, this coup against Corbyn from taking place. I think it rather turned out that Momentum actually played quite an ambiguous role in that coup. In terms of the leadership, obviously, you know, the members of Momentum were doing all they could. But, you know, I think John Landsman, we know now that by that stage, John Landsman actually wanted Jeremy Corbyn to step aside. You know, and when I first started reporting that, he denied it. But then he later, after the 2019 election, or close to the 2019 election, he actually confirmed it to the BBC. That he was actually calling for Corbyn to step down and be replaced by John McDonnell, somebody who was more sympathetic to him. I mean, John Landsman is somebody who he puts forward his own kind of legend, really.
I know he does. Yes, absolutely. It makes sense. He played a much bigger role than I'm told he actually did in the Tony Benn campaign to become the deputy leader. But you also talk in the book, Asa, about the Oxford University Labour Club and Alex Chalmers. And, you know, for me, that seemed to be the catalyst, really, where it seemed to heat up from there, the whole anti-Semitism. I mean, I know you've been obviously reporting on it. You weren't surprised by the viciousness, because that, you've known them of old, as it were, the sort of dirty tricks and tactics that they get up to. But it seemed to burst onto the wider public consciousness, I think, in 2016, I think that was, or the end of 2015. I can't remember when that was actually. With the AOC. So say a bit about that, Asa, because that's an interesting one. And do you agree that that was the catalyst, or do you think there was another
event? I do agree. Absolutely. I mean, that was really what started it all. Really, the anti-Semitism smears against the Labour Party, against Corbyn's Labour Party, and against the wider movement started there. That was really ground zero. It was Oxford University Labour Club, and it did start. I mean, it's in a way it started right from the beginning against Corbyn individually during the first leadership election in the summer of 2015. They were saying that the whole thing about, oh, you're calling Hamas and Hezbollah your friends, and that he'd supported Raed Salah and all this stuff, but it didn't gain that much traction. And people started to see, because it wasn't that effective, and they kind of backed off at that stage from calling Corbyn personally himself an anti-Semite, because he has this record of anti-racism, and so they backed off for a while. But what Oxford University Labour Club allowed them to do was they could attack pro-Corbyn students instead of personally attacking Jeremy Corbyn, who had this established record as an anti-racist. They could go for these quite vulnerable young students, basically, who were demonized as anti-Semites with no basis around it. And also, as punishment, essentially, for some of their proximity to the Palestine solidarity movement that they had, and their proximity to Jeremy Corbyn as local supporters of Jeremy Corbyn within Oxford University, the Oxford University scene, essentially the Oxford University student politics scene as the left. And it was the other thing that really shows how important the Oxford University Labour Club incident was, and I get into it in some detail in my book, was that it started off a chain of all these inquiries. So I lost count of all. There were so many different inquiries and reports into alleged anti-Semitism in the Labour Party. There must have been about 5 or 6 at a certain point. I detail it in the book, but that whole chain of inquiries, which ultimately resulted in the Equality and Human Rights Commission inquiry against the Labour Party, trying to allegedly find it guilty of institutional anti-Semitism, although in the end it didn't find that. It didn't find that at all, although that's what was asked of it. Effectively a not guilty result, although they didn't mention that. All of that whole chain of events, that 4-year-long chain of events, all these reports, inquiries constantly in the headlines, started in Oxford University Labour Club. And the person who wrote that first report was somebody who's now the head of an Israeli embassy front group, which is Labour Friends of Israel. So that was Michael Rubin. He wrote this Labour students' investigation into what happened at Oxford University Labour Club. But it was a complete hatchet job,
As so many of these sort of events were, of course. I mean, you mentioned the inquiries. I mean, Jeremy seemed to be, again, falling over himself to try to placate the unplacatable and establishing the Chakrabarty review, and you talk about that in the book as well. I mean, just give us a sense of what your take on is on that. I mean, I think it was a mistake, frankly, to even set up that inquiry, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But But what's your take on that whole process? Because I mean, obviously that also led to Mark Wadsworth, the well-known Black Rights campaigner, being suspended for asking a question at the Chakrabarti press conference to launch the report.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it was a mistake because why is this being investigated in the first place when there was no basis to it at all? Like the basis of so the Chakrabarti inquiry was triggered by the events at Oxford University Labour Club, and then several other things were sort of rolled into it, and the people who conducted the Labour students investigation, which, as I've just mentioned, was written by an asset of a foreign power, essentially, Michael Rubin, an agent of the State of Israel, essentially. That report then fed into the Chakrabarti inquiry. Now, the Chakrabarti inquiry itself as a document, it's not terrible. Like, it has some sensible things that it says in it, but it also has, it has some really unproven things that it says in it, where it says that, there was all this anti-Semitism at Oxford University Labour Club, and that, we need to do this and we need to do that. But the main problem with it was that why are you having an investigation into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? It gives the impression that there is a real problem here that needed to be dealt with, rather than a smear campaign against the left and against Palestine Solidarity Movement. And that's what it did. That gave that main impression. And the positive aspects of it were never implemented, where it said where it said there should be a moratorium on allegations of anti-Semitism and all these kinds of things. The positive aspects of it were ignored by the Labour Party bureaucracy, and the general impression of a massive problem on the left of anti-Semitism and in the Labour Party and amongst Corbyn supporters specifically was really the main upshot of it. And it it just kept the story rolling, really. Essentially was the main problem with it.
Yeah. I mean, fast forward then, I mean, obviously, everything that's happened and so on, but I mean, very timely, your book coming out. Here it is. A great book. People should, as Ken Loach said, to get a copy of it. But it coincided, didn't it, with the hyperbolic attacks on Roger Waters, sort of right on cue almost, as a sort of kind of promotion for the book about weaponizing anti-Semitism. I mean, there was a Double Down News interview that Roger did, which also got attacked. I think it was actually withdrawn from Twitter for a bit, but then they reinstated it. But what Double Down News then subsequently did a few days after was to publish another short video showing Roger Waters doing exactly the self-same show, 10, 12 years ago, but also significant. There's some sort of tribute band in Israel doing exactly the same word for word show that Roger Waters did in Berlin, which caused all the furore. What do you make of these attacks on Roger Waters? It kind of sort of proves the pointlessness about how ruthless the Israel lobby is, and how much sway they seem to have, or certainly in terms of influencing the corporate media and the political class. Because I mean, it wasn't just in this country; it was across Europe, wasn't it, that we saw Roger Waters being attacked? Although I don't think they've succeeded in cancelling him anywhere yet. I don't think. But.
No, I mean this is the problem that they're going to have. They have two problems with Roger Waters, in getting him cancelled. The first is that he's a very successful rock star, and he has a lot of money, and he can sue them and stop them from. He could stop, a venue like the O2 Arena and the venue in Manchester that he played at. He could potentially sue them for breach of contract if they'd cancelled his show. So that's one problem. The other problem that the Israel lobby's got is that he doesn't have a political party that he can be suspended from. So it's Yeah, I mean, it is exactly this. It's exactly an example of what the book. I mean, although the book doesn't mention Roger Waters except in the acknowledgements because he helped me out to finish the book.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And he provided some really important moral support as well, because he's, you know, he could understand the significance of the story because this happened to him.
Yeah.
Even back then when I was talking to him about it, this shows why I wanted. This is the other reason I really wanted to write the book. You know, in addition to this, the debate that I wanted to try and spur is the fact that yes, it's history. Yes, it's something that's happened. It's something that as a period in history I think is important to document and learn the lessons from. But it's also a story that hasn't ended. It's a story that's continuing on. Even within the Labour Party, we still see people being, you know, the small left that is even remaining, being expelled and disciplined and witch hunted in various ways. And it's spread to other parts of society now, you know, where we see that obviously David Miller, the expert in the academic expert in the Israel lobby, was sacked despite 2 independent investigations finding him not guilty of anti-Semitism, and also the leader of the National Union of Students has been kicked out due to her, due to her support for Palestinians, essentially, and she's been smeared in exactly the same way with weaponized anti-Semitism. And so we see that the same sort of thing is happening against Roger Waters, that these completely malicious and false allegations of anti-Semitism. It's a perfect example of what the book shows. And so I think it's going to be, I think the book is timely, and it's going to continue to be timely, unfortunately, because this is an issue that is not going away. And it's a tactic that is so useful to the right. It's a weapon that the Israel lobby has provided to the right, to the entire wide swathe of the right, from the right of the Labour Party through to the Conservatives Party, all the way through to the fascist right, which now attacks anti-racists and says, well, you're the real racists because you hate Jews and you hate Israel. And so this kind of nonsense weaponized anti-Semitism is an important weapon that the Israel lobby has provided to the right. And it can't be swept under the rug. It can only be defeated. You know, it can't be ignored like John McDonnell tried to argue. It can only be actively fought against and defeated. And, you know, if you do fight it, you might not win. You tried to fight it from within the Labour Party, Chris, and you didn't win. But that was only because you were a lone voice, really, in terms of Labour MPs, anyway.
Yeah.
And there was no solidarity with you. But, you know, so you fought and you didn't win. But the only way you can win is to fight. And this, I just hope the lessons are learned from it, basically.
Well, it's a great book, Asa. I mean, it's catalogued, a shameful chapter, I think, in the history of the Labour movement, but actually more widely than that, as you say, because it's spread well beyond now the Labour Party and the Corbyn project, and as you say, into academia and all the rest of it. One of the things that I've been doing on the other program that I host, Palestine Declassified, we've been exploring the influence of the Israel lobby, and it's incredible, really. I mean, it's quite pervasive. It's sort of ubiquitous, and its influence is
it's a great show. Across. Everyone should watch it. It's
indeed. Thank you, Conrad. Yeah.
You're doing some really important research, cutting edge research. Actually, you've come up with a lot of stuff which I hadn't known. It's
frightening, actually, the extent of it. And of course, when we highlight it, I mean, we're often accused of, oh, well, it's just an example of anti-Semitism, but it's just a reality of the ubiquitous influence of the Israel lobby. And I guess if we're going to fight back against it, shows like Palestine Declassified your book is absolutely crucial, because this kind of sets it all out. It explains it to people, in very clear language, what it is we are up against. And I think, unless you actually understand that and know that, it's going to be very, very difficult to actually prevail in the end. But like you say, very optimistically, Asa, we can prevail. It just takes political will to do it. And regrettably, that was sadly lacking in the upper echelons of the movement. And it's still happening in the trade union movement today. And you've cited some examples in terms of what's happening today, Miller, etc. But we've seen people in the General Secretary of the GMB protesting about Loki appearing at the Tolpuddle Festival last year, a celebration of the labour movements, etc. He got cancelled from there. This year they banned the film The Big Lie about the demise of the Corbyn project. What happened there? I mean, it's quite incredible, really, that this sort of thing can be happening still inside the labour movement and beyond it. But as I say, Asa, it's a great book. So, but where can people get hold of a copy? So I know a lot of people say they're desperately trying to get hold of a copy, and is it going to be available in bookshops, or do you have to order it online?
I actually went into London on Monday, and I went to the Bookmarks, the Socialist bookshop, and they had a copy there.
Great.
They should get more than one copy in.
Absolutely.
So it's in bookshops. I know it's available. Online bookshops, we don't want to encourage people to buy from Amazon, but it is on Amazon.
Yes, of course,
but the best place to get it from is direct from the publisher, which is orbooks.com, or books.
Okay, so if people just key that into a Google search or something, they'll be able to find it. Great. And is it going to be available on Kindle and things like that?
Yes, it's on Kindle, and it's on. You can buy an ebook as well. Yeah.
Great. And are you going to be doing an Audible version, Asa?
I would love to do an Audible version, but that's also owned by Amazon, and so they'd have to approach the publisher. So so if people buy enough copies of the book, then there will be. I'm sure there would be an audiobook version. Yeah.
Great, that'd be great. Well, listen, thanks very much indeed for taking the time, Asa, for speaking to us this evening. Good luck with the book sales, everybody. Get hold of a copy if you can. Weaponising Anti-Semitism, how the Israel lobby brought down Jeremy Corbyn, by Asa Winstanley. Get a copy. It's really important, because knowledge is power, and everybody should get this book for sure. Thank you, Asa, for being on the show this evening. Thanks everybody for watching. Hopefully we'll be back next week at the same time. So until then, this is Chris Williamson saying bye for now.